I remember the exact moment my phone lit up that morning. I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window in my apartment. The city skyline spread out before me like a living painting. My silk blouse still smelled faintly of lavender from last night's wash, and I was clutching a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. The screen buzzed, flashing a photo of my cousin Amanda, her cheeks sunburned and glowing, grinning on the deck of a cruise ship. The caption below the group photo hit me harder than I'd like to admit. Family trip of a lifetime. So grateful Mom and Dad made this happen. I froze. My thumb hovered over the glass as the words blurred. My parents. A cruise. Everyone was there, my siblings, my cousins, even my aunt who always claimed she couldn't afford a cab ride, let alone a vacation. And yet, just 2 months earlier, I had wired my parents $2,300, money I thought was for Dad's overdue medical bills. My chest tightened, but I forced my face into calm. I'd trained myself well. The world saw a composed, successful woman who didn't flinch. But inside, it was like an old wound had split open again. The kind that stings, not because of the money but because of what it reveals, who you are to the people who are supposed to love you most. I set the mug down, my hands trembling slightly. For the first time in years, I realized I couldn't keep running from this. I wasn't always this steady. Years ago, I was the girl who swallowed her words just to keep the peace, the one who tried too hard to earn a place at a table that was never set for her. I was 23 when the breaking point came. Dad had just gotten out of the hospital after a minor heart scare, and we were all sitting around the kitchen table. The house smelled of fried chicken, the kind Mom made when she wanted to pretend everything was fine. My siblings laughed and joked, while I tried to explain that I'd just been offered a chance to move across the country for a job, an entry-level position in a marketing firm, but a step toward something bigger. "You can't just run off like that," Mom said, her tone sharp, like I was selfish for even considering it. "Who's going to help around here?" I remember my throat tightening, my hands damp with sweat under the table. "I'll still send money," I said quietly, "but I need to build something for myself too." Dad barely looked at me, stabbing at his plate. "Always thinking about yourself," he muttered. "You've got a roof here, food here. Why isn't that enough?" The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I had worked double shifts at the diner to cover bills when Dad couldn't. I'd skipped college trips because there was no money for gas. Yet somehow, in their eyes, I was ungrateful. That night, I went to my grandmother's room, Grandma June, the only person who seemed to see me clearly. She sat in her worn recliner, knitting needles clinking softly. When I told her about the job, about how scared I was to leave, she reached over and pressed a small silver locket into my hand. Inside was a faded photo of her as a young woman, standing proudly in front of the diner she once owned. "Don't let them clip your wings, sweetheart," she whispered. "You come from women who built their own way. This family forgets that sometimes. You don't owe anyone your silence." I closed my fingers around the locket, the metal cool against my palm. That night, for the first time, I packed a suitcase not for someone else's need, but for my own future. The next morning, I left with a single duffel bag, a borrowed car, and that locket tucked safely against my heart. It was the first step toward independence, and the first step away from them. Moving to Chicago with barely $500 in my account felt reckless at the time. I slept on an air mattress in a studio apartment that smelled faintly of mildew, my suitcase tucked in the corner, like a silent witness to all my doubts. Every morning I woke up before sunrise, pressed my only blazer, and rode the train downtown, rehearsing my smile in the smudged reflection of the train window. The marketing firm was no dream job. I was the one making coffee runs, arranging binders, answering phones with a cheerful voice even when my throat ached. But I watched. I listened. I stayed late after everyone left, combing through campaigns, scribbling notes, teaching myself why one ad worked and another didn't. Some nights, the loneliness pressed down so heavily, I thought about packing up and heading back. But then I'd hold Grandma June's locket, feeling the tiny etching of the diner doorframe with my thumb. She had once stood on her own, against all odds. I could too. Things shifted the day I met Karen Whitfield, the firm's senior creative director. She noticed me staying late, hunched over a stack of proposals. Instead of scolding me for overstepping, she leaned against my desk and said, "Show me what you see." My hands shook as I explained how one campaign's language alienated women, how another failed to understand its audience. She listened, really listened, and when I finished, she smiled. "You've got an eye for this. Don't waste it fetching coffee." From then on, Karen became my mentor. She pushed me hard, editing my ideas without mercy, sending me back to the drawing board until my voice sharpened into something strong and clear. She believed in me in a way I had never experienced at home. My first real victory came with a small local client, a bakery that wanted to rebrand. I poured everything into it, late nights sketching logos, weekends writing taglines, endless revisions. When their sales tripled after the launch, my name suddenly carried weight in the office. It wasn't luck, it was proof. One client turned into another. Soon I was freelancing on the side, building a portfolio, saving every penny. I never posted the big wins on social media. To my family, I was just managing in the city, probably scraping by. And I let them believe that. It was easier than facing their judgment or their endless needs. By the time I was 28, I had founded my own agency, small but fierce, with a team that trusted my vision. The contracts grew bigger, tech startups, fashion labels, even a nonprofit or two. My office walls filled with framed campaigns, each one a step further from the girl who once sat at that kitchen table, too afraid to speak. But every holiday call home was the same. "When are you going to settle down?" Mom would ask. "Don't forget where you came from," Dad would add. They had no idea I was signing deals worth more than their annual income. I never corrected them. Part of me wanted to prove it all one day. Part of me dreaded what they'd do with the truth. And then came the cruise photo. 2 weeks after the cruise photo landed in my inbox, my parents showed up in Chicago. No warning, no call ahead, just a knock on the glass doors of my agency's lobby. I was in the middle of reviewing a pitch deck when my assistant peeked her head in. There's a couple downstairs asking for you. They said they're your parents." For a moment, I froze. My parents had never once visited me in the city, not in all the years I'd lived here. I gathered my breath, smoothed my blouse, and walked to the elevator. The doors opened, and there they were, Mom in a floral blouse, Dad in a baseball cap, both of them looking around like tourists in an unfamiliar country. I almost laughed at the irony, how they could afford a luxury cruise for the whole family, but here they stood, awkward and expectant, like I was still the girl they'd underestimated. "Hey, sweetheart," Mom said brightly, though her eyes darted nervously around the marble lobby. "We were in town and thought we'd stop by." I led them upstairs. My office sat at the top floor, sunlight streaming through tall windows, the skyline stretching endlessly behind me. The walls were lined with framed campaigns, sleek logos, bold images, names they'd recognize from TV commercials and storefronts. On one side sat a polished oak table with fresh orchids. On the other, a glass shelf with Grandma June's locket displayed inside a shadow box. They walked in slowly, their steps echoing against the polished floor. I didn't say a word. I just let them take it in. The leather chairs, the hum of computers outside, the employees who nodded respectfully when they saw me. Dad finally broke the silence. All of this is yours?" "Yes," I said evenly, my voice steady but firm. "Every bit of it. I built this company from scratch." Mom blinked, her mouth slightly open. "But you never told us. We thought you were just getting by." I let out a soft laugh, tinged with irony. "That's what you preferred to believe." It was easier to think of me as the struggling daughter who'd send money home than to see me as someone who didn't need saving. The color drained from her cheeks. Dad shifted uncomfortably, his cap twisting in his hands. "We didn't mean," he trailed off, unable to finish. I leaned forward across my desk. 2 months ago, I gave you $2,300 because you told me Dad's bills were overdue. Then I see a photo of all of you on a cruise. Without me." Silence pressed down on the room like a heavy blanket. They avoided my eyes, guilt etched into every line of their faces. "Do you know what that felt like?" I continued, my voice breaking slightly before regaining strength. It wasn't about the money. It was about the lie. About realizing that even after everything I've built, I'm still the one you leave behind. Mom's eyes welled with tears. Dad cleared his throat, his voice rough. We just wanted to do something nice for the family. We thought you were too busy. We thought you'd understand. I sat back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I spoke. What I understand is that you never saw me. Not then. Not now. But today you're going to. Their gazes swept around the office, once more, lingering on the campaign awards, the elegant space, the team bustling outside. I could see it settling in. The realization that I was not the daughter they thought I was, but a woman who had built a world without their approval. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small in their presence. I felt powerful. For the first time, the balance had shifted. They sat across from me, not as parents handing down judgment, but as people confronted with the truth of who I had become. And I wasn't about to let the moment slip away. I folded my hands on the desk, steady and deliberate. So let's be clear, I said. You came here because you want something. What is it? Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Dad finally spoke, his tone cautious. We thought maybe you could help, with some of the house repairs. Things are getting expensive. Of course. Another ask. Another hand outstretched. I let the silence linger before answering. I'm willing to help, I said slowly, but not the way we've always done this. Things will change. If you want my support, there will be conditions. Mom frowned. Conditions? Yes. Because I've learned that giving without boundaries only enables the same patterns. If I give, it has to mean growth for you too. I could see their discomfort, but I pressed on. First, honesty. No more lies. If you need money, it's for what you say it's for. If you want help, you tell me the truth. I will not tolerate another medical bill that turns into a vacation. They both shifted in their seats. I didn't soften my voice. Second, responsibility. You can't keep leaning on me while ignoring your own opportunities. Dad, you're good with carpentry. You've always been able to fix anything. Start using that skill again. Offer your services even part-time. Mom, you love organizing church events. Turn that into something real. A catering service, party planning, something that gives you pride. They exchanged uncertain glances. And third, I continued, my voice firm but steady. Respect. Respect me. Respect my time. Respect the woman I've become. That means no dismissive comments, no guilt trips, no making me feel smaller so others can feel bigger. If you can't manage that, then you don't get access to my support. For a long time, no one spoke. I watched their faces, a mix of resistance and shame, but also something else. A flicker of realization. Mom finally whispered, "We never thought of it that way. We always assumed you'd be there." "I am here," I said, softening just enough to let warmth seep through. "But not as the girl you overlooked. I'm here as the woman I chose to become. If you want me in your lives, it has to be different now. Fair. Honest. Respectful." Dad looked down at his hands, then back at me. For once, he didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, as though the weight of my words finally sank in. In that moment, I wasn't just their daughter. I was the one setting the rules, defining the future. And it felt liberating. In the weeks that followed, I waited to see if my words had actually taken root. I half expected the phone calls to dry up, or for them to dismiss everything I'd said as pride. But slowly, almost cautiously, something began to shift. Dad sent me a photo one afternoon, his hands covered in sawdust, a half-finished bookshelf behind him. "First commission in years," the text read. Just 5 words, but they carried more weight than any apology he could have offered. Mom called a week later, not to ask for money, but to tell me she'd helped organize a wedding reception at church. "They actually paid me," she said with a little laugh, part surprise, part pride. For the first time, her voice carried a spark I'd never heard when she was talking about me. It wasn't perfection. Old habits crept in sometimes, subtle hints, familiar sighs. But each time, I gently reminded them of the boundaries I'd set. And, to my surprise, they listened. Maybe reluctantly at first, but they listened. One evening, after a long day at the office, I sat by my window with a glass of wine. The city glittered below, alive with possibility. I reached into the shadow box on my shelf and held Grandma June's locket in my palm. The silver was cool against my skin, the tiny photo inside as steady as ever. Her words echoed back to me. Don't let them clip your wings. I thought of the girl I had been, the one who shook at the kitchen table, desperate to be heard. And I thought of the woman I had become, the one who now set the terms, who had built something that couldn't be taken away by lies or silence. Family, I realized, isn't just the people who share your blood. It's the people who see you, respect you, and stand with you as you grow. And if you're lucky, sometimes even the ones who hurt you can learn to become part of that circle if you're brave enough to demand it. I placed the locket back on the shelf, a quiet smile tugging at my lips. Because I knew now, I hadn't just given my parents $2,300. I had given myself something far more valuable, permission to stand tall, to set boundaries, and to never again apologize for the life I had built. And that was worth more than any cruise could ever buy.